Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. James Lyons Weiler coming to you live from the WWDNYK studios in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Today, we're going to go into a rather outstanding story of really super good news that science, the scientific consensus, the medical consensus had it wrong, completely wrong, misled people. Why is that really good news? Well, let's take a look at this opening clip here, and you'll see in a moment.
So this,
See, good.
I'm,
Right on. That's what you want to do. Next word. Get it, babe.
I'm,
S I G N I. Nice and easy. Please simple yarn designs. Great, very good.
I never ever realized that Matthew was comprehending things at all.
Are you glad that you started to spell? Yeah. Of all the therapies that we've tried, this is the single most powerful and most effective thing we've done.
It seems so simple, and yet it is absolutely life-altering.
I've been working with non-speaking individuals for about 25 years. I did a lot of traditional therapies and a lot of traditional approaches for years, and I did everything wrong. For those of us who are neurotypical, if we think about an action, our body is going to do it. For all of the people that we see, they may feel or experience something or have a desire to do something, but they can't necessarily translate the thought that they're having into an action. It's not an issue of I don't understand. It's not an issue of I don't want to. It's an issue of I can't make my body do it.
Summer house over by a lake.
It's a motor issue that every single kid who's given the opportunity to learn how to spell to communicate has said that my brain tells my body to do something and my body just doesn't cooperate.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Right from the people who have the most experience with this. And I want to share with you the good news that J.B. Handley is here with his son Jamie on Unbreaking Science to bring forward their story, which is chronicled in a fantastic book that's coming out soon. The book is underestimated, an autism miracle. JB, thanks so much for being on Unbreaking Science, brother. So let's talk about
Thank you so much for having me.
right on. So congratulations on this major breakthrough in your personal life. Congratulations on the book to both of you, both co-authors, JB and Jamie. And it's an honor to have you. I can't tell you how excited I am to help get the word out. So I have a bunch of questions and I barely know where to start. When did you run into this spelling to communicate technology?
Yeah, so I think the first thing I would say was just watching that video alongside you. I mean, I echo everything those parents are saying. I mean, it sounds almost too good to be true, right? Like how miraculous the experience is for the average parent. And yet, as I watched them, I was just nodding my head and kind of looking over at Jamie, who's sitting next to me right now, a little bit shy. We got a phone call from a Philadelphia area mom named Honey Renisella, and she told us this somewhat crazy sounding story about her son Vince, who, like Jamie, is a non-speaker. And I do want to talk about what that definition actually means because it's relevant for parents to understand it. But Vince was a non-speaker, and he was starting to embark upon this journey with spelling to communicate. And in really simple terms, spelling to communicate has you spell on a letterboard, right? By pointing. It seems really rudimentary, but the thinking behind it is that fine motor is a real challenge for non-speaking kids. In fact, I'll just call it S2C from now on to make life simple. The S2C practitioners would assert that we've been wrong about the nature of the disability, that the disability is not a cognitive disability, it's a motor disability and a motor planning disability. And things like speech and fine motor with, like, on a keyboard are more challenging. And what S2C does is it just asks you to largely use your shoulder because you're pointing. I know that feels like fine motor, but it's not. It's coming from the movement's coming from your shoulder. Mm-hmm. And with time, and I want to emphasize that this was not an overnight thing. With time, basically Jamie built motor pathways to allow him to spell on this letterboard. So we get this phone call from a woman in Philadelphia, Honey Rinisella. She tells us and shows us all these amazing things that her son Vince is spelling. I'm blown away, a little bit skeptical that there must have been something unique or special about Vince that allowed him to be so eloquent. But we were willing, my wife and I were willing to give it a try. And I flew to Virginia, which is where Growing Kids Therapy Center is based, which is the video that you just showed there in Herndon, which is in Fairfax County in Northern Virginia. And by the 4th hour of the second day, Jamie was spelling pretty liberally on a letterboard. And they do in S2C these things called lessons, where it's a couple page document on any subject. And the point of the lessons isn't really to teach the kids because they already know most of this stuff. It's to give them a chance to spell. And Jamie was spelling every word he was asked to spell. And this alone was a shock to my system. I'm kind of looking over at him because he's sitting there all proud. I didn't know he could spell. And on the second day, they were doing a lesson on plants like the Venus flytrap and that kind of thing. And Elizabeth Vossler, who's the originator of all this, who was the blonde woman in that video, she asked Jamie what the opposite of carnivore was. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. That word's not in the lesson. And Jamie immediately spelled herbivore. And I know I know it sounds like a small thing. It sounds like a small thing now, but at that moment, like, I honestly had no idea. And, she's like, yep, that's very typical. They have pre-existing knowledge. And, so over the next few months, we embarked upon a pretty rigorous daily process of spelling where you're really just spelling what they call in S2C land known words. Yeah. Okay. And the analogy I would use is that you're trying to build your golf swing. It's not about cognition because it's already in there. You're trying to build a neuronal pathway that doesn't exist between the brain and the arm, right? Mm-hmm. And whether you want to call that neuroplasticity or myelination, or the right analogy could also be stroke victims, right? Who are retaught movements with their mouth, with their arms, whatever, and a different part of their brain steps in and takes over, right? So we were really just working on Jamie's connections. And we got down to Southern California with another amazing S2C practitioner named Dawn Marie Gavin, who's in the book quite a bit. And we were doing a lesson on the Boston Red Sox and when they won the World Series a few years back after not having won for 80 years or whatever. And Jamie was cranking through all the words, and he had gotten to this board, right, this 26-letter board, because they actually start with an 8-letter board. I'm not going to bore people with every single step because it's all in the book. But
well, for parents, for parents where this is brand new, when we're talking back about the large motor skill, there are developmental pathways that the brain has to go through. Jamie, you did JB, you did your deep dive on autism. I did my deep dive on autism. There are milestones for fine motor skills, and it has to do with the connectedness and specifically the synaptic pruning that has to take place to make the structures so that the fine motor skills take place. Any parent that's had a kid, you give them Cheerios because it's good for them to pick up Cheerios, right? And you put them in the mouth. The mouth is filled with tons of nerve systems, nerve endings. So when you're talking about the fewer letters. The fewer letters are just kind of like you said, getting yourself oriented and used to making that movement. And who would have thought that all of this time, after how many years, since 1950s with autism, that these kids could actually do what they're doing inside their brain. So go ahead with from the large letters to the boards.
I'll tell you the Red Sox story in just a second, but I want to build on something you said because it was such a shock to me too. Ocular motor is one of the most severe areas of disability. And with respect to all the clinicians who've met with Jamie over the years, no one ever mentioned that. And what ocular apraxia is the word they use. And what that really means is it's just really hard for them to get their eyes to even go where they want them to go. And with some kids, you can just sort of take a pencil and ask them to follow it and go up and down and side to side. And with many non-speakers, you will see that that's an extreme challenge. Mm-hmm. And so imagine that when you're trying to go along this letterboard, right? Just building pathways to control even your eyes can be challenging. And all the S2C practitioners, they will sit there and really watch the child's eyes. And in some cases, they might have to, for some kids, they might have to cover half the board, right? Or do other things to allow them to focus. And so imagine with this just extreme motor disability, how many different ways that can be misinterpreted to somehow reflect intelligence.
Totally.
Right?
Yep.
You know, Jamie will tell me at times that he wants to do something and he just can't get his body to do it. Right? I think it's very hard for the average person walking around this earth talking to even relate to what these kids, young adults are dealing with.
Yep.
And in S2C land, this is all common knowledge, fully accepted. You know what's amazing, Jack, about S2C land is even like the occupational therapy is different because they're focused on motor pretty much exclusively. Music therapy is a way to connect the brain and the fine motor skills. I mean, everything is understood. Music therapy can do ocular therapy as well. Like they get the nature of the disability. And it's hard to make this point strongly enough. What they're saying, and I'm now have internalized and believe because I've borne witness with my own child, what they're saying is that it's not a cognitive disability at all. They're saying it's a motor disability.
Well, I remember I read the book. It's not in print yet, but you sent me the copy, and the fact that Jamie self-identified first of all and said, "I find, math is easy, and to my brain, and I don't know why." I mean, it's the self-referential, the ability to refer to oneself and to analyze one's own cognitive skills is present in these kids, which is a miracle to know. And it's amazing. It's an amazing opportunity, right? So go ahead.
Yeah, I have to make it even more emphatic.
Yeah.
They're just cognitively somewhere between normal and superior.
Yeah.
Right? It's not a matter of how many boxes they check or this or that, or, oh my gosh, they're capable of it. They're capable of everything and probably a whole lot more. Like Jamie doesn't even identify with the word autism, which, as we know, is just a label for whatever. He says, I'm a non-speaker.
Yeah.
I'm a non-speaker, but he's incredibly intelligent. Their thoughtfulness, their awareness. Hang on, my wife is looking at me in the background. What's going on? You're just cheering because I'm doing well? Okay, thanks.
That's great.
I'm getting cheers in the background. No, but I can't make that point. ABA is based on a premise that they are cognitively incapable.
I'm so glad you brought that up
Let's think for a moment that the singular form of therapy that is paid for by insurance, recommended, encouraged, is based on a faulty premise. I'm not making that argument. I think it's true. It's obviously controversial. ABA is a behavioral therapy to try to get these children to conform to our standards of behavior. And imagine for a minute, if you were hyper intelligent and you also happen to be hyperactive because that's just the way your body was, and somebody was trying to get you to sit still in a chair all day, how crazy that would make you.
It'd make me very angry.
Right? I mean, the scale of mistreatment and misunderstanding that these non-speakers are going through as you and I sit here right now is pretty overwhelming. In fact, I'm going to diverge once again, Jack, because I just think this is so amazing. I'm not going to name her, but hang on, this is worth it. You don't mind.
No.
Where is it? I got this email from a mom, and it was so perfect. Here we go. Okay. So this is written by a mom who absolutely loves her son, who I know is in Jamie's age range, and she just read the book, and she said, "Few pages turned with a dry eye. Both sleeves of my shirt have been damp for 2 days. I just requested information from S2C, and like you, mentioned hope being a drug," which I do mention. Hope is a drug for autism parents. "I'm also trying to push it back. Regardless," and this is a really important part of this, "how I react and how I parent my son is forever changed. How could I have gotten so frustrated with him for not understanding when it's me? Thank you for sending this book. Please tell Jamie Notoriously Strong," that's Jamie's nickname for himself, "thank you for much needed insight. It seems our family needs an overhaul in communication."
Yeah.
Like, so there it is right there. Like, from the day that the premise of S2C got introduced to me,
Yeah.
I was already looking at Jamie through a different lens. Like, I think most parents aspire to treat their child with autism as normally as possible. But when you're certain beyond a reasonable doubt that they're tracking everything and hyper intelligent, it's just even easier.
It goes from you treating them like a 3-year-old, which the presumption is that they're maybe about the cognitive development of a 3-year-old, and you're speaking slow, right? JB, would you like to go to it's normal, it's natural for all,
Yes.
right? Your son Jamie said in your book, as you know, that was the worst part of it, is being treated like he's stupid. And he's clearly not stupid, and that's amazing to know. He's clearly an amazing mind, just waiting to, sap up the rest of the world and to do astrophysics or whatever he becomes into life. And all those ABA specialists that wanted me jump on board, they came to me wanting me to help them with ABA as a scientist. No, just do this. All ABA people should ask to be trained to do this S2C, and it will set everything hyper exponential beyond anyone's expectations. It's so cool.
I don't want to get too negative, because this is really an uplifting story that I hope every parent can hear for their own child. But the ABA people are the most negative on this therapy, which is really sad. And even within Jamie's well-intended autism school, the people who have a BCBA next to their name, which is the certification or the degree that people who specialize in ABA have, they won't acknowledge Jamie's letterboard. They won't engage with him. They won't appear in the same classroom as him. And it's enraging for him, as you can imagine. And those people are like, I don't even know. I mean, brainwashed or something. I mean, it's really maddening. And, people make this mistake. They say that this is facilitated communication, which implies that someone's hand is on the other. And it's not. And more importantly, there are a handful of kids, I don't want to say it's every one because it's not, but there are a handful of kids who graduate from a letterboard to a keyboard that then becomes a fixed keyboard, right? Meaning that they're independently spelling. And I've just said to people, how many of those do you need to prove a doubter wrong?
Right.
I mean, isn't one enough? Right? Exactly. And then the one says, yes, the letterboard helped me get here. And you go, really? Like, we're going to still...
Listen,
I don't want to focus on that because it's stupid.
I don't mind focusing on it because I am an optimist. I think that eventually, through the BCBA reform or through a lawsuit or something like that, the entire world's going to open up for millions of kids who are otherwise boxed in, and it takes books like yours. I mean, it takes persistence, and Notoriously Strong is, if anything, a role model, right, for other kids who are just waiting to be able to communicate with their parents and with their teachers and with their employers. And there's a valuable human resource sitting there idle. Then they're so smart, many of them, and they can be put to good use for their own sustenance, and that's the most beautiful part about this.
It's hard to put into words the joy that this has brought. Well, first and foremost, Jamie, but our whole family. Yeah. It's you sort of need to be a parent in my shoes to really get it, right? Like, it's just hard to put into words. I had resolved with a knife in my heart to accept that I would never really know what it was like for Jamie to be Jamie, that I would never really understand how he processed the world, how he thought about his family, whether he had dreams and hopes and goals, and that Lisa and I, my wife, were left to sort of like guess what the best course of his life would be in terms of what sorts of situations and everything to put him in. To have all that literally removed 100% from our existence, and to have it be replaced by getting to know the amazing dude who's sitting shoulder to shoulder with me right now, and to know what a beautiful, active, gracious, loving mind he's possessed with, and the goals that he does have for himself and his life, and the extreme love and loyalty that he has for his family. And quite shocking to me, as I was plagued with plenty of guilt about not having figured this out sooner, was the grace with which he entered into our world, and the understanding that he showed for the time it took us, and the willingness to forgive and to accept that he knew we were doing our best and trying our hardest. And, you know, even to the point of telling us, like, I knew you would figure it out, right? He's like sitting there with the world's biggest secret, right?
That's awesome.
Basically
That's
sitting there with the world's biggest secret going, win.
That's awesome.
And, you know, on a level, as we've talked about with Jamie in detail, I mean, I've had Jamie fluent now. Fluent is this idea, Jack, that he can share any thought or idea on the board, right? So he's been fluent on the boards for over a year now. So you can imagine the scale of conversation that we've been able to have with Jamie and the types of topics that we've been able to deal with, and the grace. And I've seen this in other similar non-speakers who've become open, who've become fluent. They're mostly filled with gratitude when they could easily be filled with spite. And to a kid that I've met, and it's a small sample of probably a dozen that I've been in very close contact with, they just want to help other people like them, other non-speakers, because they know what an unfair sort of prison it can be, and they know the joy of coming out the other side. And in fact, that's the whole reason that this book was written. It was written at Jamie's behest, because he just wanted to share his story with other people. And I'm just going to jump back for a really quick second because it's a good story, and I think it gives people some good context. So we're working on spelling, and Jamie's doing amazing. And it's only been, in our case, about 4 months at this point. And I want to emphasize, it could take 3 months for a child to become open. It could take 1.5 years. I mean, I wish I could give you like a perfect time frame. We're doing this lesson on the Red Sox, and Jamie's spelling Fenway Park and Jacoby Ellsbury and all these, you know, words associated with the lesson. And he's doing a wonderful job. And my father happens to be in the room because he came out to join me to kind of bear witness for himself. And Dawn Marie, who's the S2C practitioner, at the end of the lesson, she turns to Jamie and she says, "Jamie, what did you think of that lesson?" And I'm like, whoa. You know, hold on. Like, that's a question that invites an opinion, which Jamie had not provided yet on the boards. He'd only been doing rote, you know, words. And the backstory that you need to know is that I'm a diehard Yankee fan, and I always have been. I wear Yankee sweatshirts. Whatever. My dad's from the New York area. I went to a Yankee game as early as 1977. I know every guy on that team by heart. Like, I'm a real legit, you know, true blue Yankee fan, and I hate the Red Sox, and I always have. So I was sort of suffering my way through this lesson, you know, oh God, you know. And so Jamie says to Dawn Marie, and this is like that moment, he says, "The Sox won, but the Yankees are champs in my family."
So that's,
I mean,
like, wait a minute. He's been paying attention. He can see
so many
the world
things
through your view. He has empathy. All of it just fell. I mean, that must have been what
Everything
an
fell.
amazing moment. Everything fell.
It was. I couldn't really make eye contact with my dad because we're both kind of weepy at that point. And
Wow.
Yeah, that was it. That was it. And like, we've literally never looked back after that moment.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of Jamie's words and writing in the book so that anybody can understand. Like, and I would just say this, like, can we just say they're normal with a motor disability? Like, that's really what it feels like. And even normal is a frustrating word, right? Because that implies like some kind of stereotype. But I mean, they're brilliant, fully aware, fully functioning. And I've asked Jamie about this a lot because he has other non-speakers in his school. In fact, what typically happens in an average autism school is all the non-speakers get put in the life skills classroom, right? It's sort of an ableist move, really, if you think about it, because their impairment keeps them from communicating their brilliance, so they get put in the life skills class because the school doesn't know any better. And so that's exactly where Jamie was.
It's the ultimate lesson in neurodiversity. I mean, it's 180 degrees from what anybody ever expected. I had a question that's related to what you were just talking about. You know, you mentioned the grace that Jamie exhibited. What was his first joke? When did you first say something that really made you lose it?
Oh God.
Or best joke?
You know, you've stumped me. You've only stumped me for a moment, so I promise to come back to it. I mean, he's just said so many.
That's all right.
He said so many witty and funny things.
Right. It'll come.
You know, I mean, I have the best one. He was in the middle. It was very early on, and he'd been given this opportunity to sort of write creatively with Dawn Marie. There was a time when I couldn't spell with Jamie. He could only spell through his S2C practitioners. So we would desperately get back to these meetings as quickly as we could to get to know our son more, right? Can you imagine?
Sure.
You leave and you're like, I can't do this with you yet, because it does take some training. Now I can do it with him, so I have it, 24/7. But that wasn't always the case. And so we were in with Dawn Marie, and she had taken Jamie down this really neat path of doing some creative writing. Sort of like, it was almost like an extended Mad Lib. So it was like, here's the first sentence, Jamie, and then you just go, okay? So he's in the middle of just flowing in this wonderful creative process. And meanwhile, they're very, I don't want to say there's a lot of rules, but they try to do STC in a kind of a regimented way, right? Sit up straight in the chair, have the board in roughly the same place, just things to make the process easier on the body. Mm-hmm. And so Dawn Marie is correcting things while he's writing, sit up, blah, blah, blah. And so he's writing this creative thing, and right in the middle of it, he goes, "You are a posture Nazi."
See.
So that was like, okay, yeah, this kid is funny.
That is awesome. So let me ask you. You know your dad. You know yourself pretty well. Your wife knows yourself pretty well. Before you met Jamie this way, right? You had some hints of personality, certainly some idea of your own son's personalities. Was the personality that you thought you recognized in Jamie the same, different, and what is the most surprising part of his personality, other than the things you've talked about, that you've come to know about?
That's such a great question. First of all, the quick answer is yes, because he was always extremely loving. And Jamie's commitment to his family and the priority he places on his family and those relationships is at the top of his list. In many ways, he's the classic example of having his priorities straight and a reminder to us all of what matters. And that really did manifest in his loving, always around us, always wanting to snuggle and be a part of us kind of nature. So absolutely that matched who we thought Jamie was. I would say that the scale of perception, I mean, he is a Buddha of wisdom. He is the person we go to for advice, even his older brother.
He's had a lot of time to think things through. He's had a lot of time to think things through. Yeah.
This is what Elizabeth Vossler is a name that a lot of people in sort of our autism world, if you will, whatever, they don't maybe know that name yet. I mean, this woman deserves like a Nobel Prize. I mean, this is the person who kind of innovated and created S2C. She always talks about how they are the keenest observers and listeners on the planet. I mean, Jamie's Spanish is very good because his brother and sister took it in school and they would drill in front of him. And
Wow.
You know, Jen Larson's
Of
son, who's
course.
now fully fluent, he knows computer languages because Jen owns a computer server company and they talk, you know, programming languages at home, and he picked up on all that. Like, they are the keenest observers, they're sponges, and they don't miss anything. They don't miss anything. And so Jamie's hyper awareness, and I do want to go back to one point about this. So Jamie's in this non-speaker classroom, and you know, we ask him, like, are all the other non-speakers like you? And he's like, yeah, of course.
Of course. Yeah.
And it's like, do you guys communicate? Right? Because they're all non-speakers. And he says, yes, we can all sense each other. And he has a tremendous amount of loyalty and love for that whole group of what happened to be boys who he was in that non-speaking classroom with. You know, luckily many of them are embarking on their own S2C journeys now. And so he's right on the precipice of having the chance to just be in a to be in a two-way relationship with them imminently as they learn to communicate. And each one of them further proves, you know, I asked Elizabeth Vossler early on because I was, you know, just trying to wrap my head around this whole thing. And I'm like, so have there been any kids who like showed up at your clinic here in Virginia who had an autism diagnosis, who were non-speakers, who were in fact cognitively disabled, right? Like, who actually met what we all think to be true, not we all, but what many think to be true. And she's like, not yet.
That's amazing. That's incredible. So he placed his expectations of his peers is appropriately placed, and we are way out in left field, right? So
totally. You know, he and it's great. I mean, like, not only are his expectations high as they are for himself, not only does he know in his heart that they are every bit the same brain person that he is, but he's emphatic about fighting until they all get that opportunity as well. You know, there's a pretty popular book called The Reason I Jump. And what's interesting about that book is the kid, the protagonist of the book, and it's a true story, it happens to be Japanese. And he used a letterboard with hiragana and katakana on it, which is Japanese alphabet. But it was a letterboard nonetheless. It was no different than what we're doing here.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting about The Reason I Jump is it was never framed that they're all this way. He was sort of framed as like a Martian, and I don't mean that pejoratively. You understand how I mean it? Like a unicorn, a 1 in a billion kind of. We somehow got inside the mind of a non-speaker with autism, and then his thoughts about the world are supposed to speak for all of them, which is absurd. It would be like me writing my philosophy on life, and then it's like, this is an example of how humans think about the world. No, it's not. It's my view. And like Jamie kind of views that book the same way. Like, this is cool, but he doesn't represent anybody more than himself. Like, he's just one guy, like, with his own thoughts. But that book, you know, it really frustrated me that like it didn't mention that, oh, by the way, they're all like this. This mom just figured it out on her own with a letterboard a long time ago, right? And then he wrote this amazing book, and it deserves to be read, and he's an amazing guy. But like, they're all capable of what you did. I think that's the missing piece.
Yeah, that's missing. So have you and Jamie had conversations, JB, about autism symptoms that are classic autism symptoms? Like what his personal experience has been with those at all? Mm-hmm.
You know, a little bit. Okay, so as an example, stims, which are movements or words or manifestations. You know, I think he used the term, it helps calm the inner movement beast. Okay, so that's an insight. And I think what's important about that is stims are often regulatory in nature. And yet they try to coach them out of the children.
Yeah. Right?
So imagine you have some sort of habit that allows you to bring your decibels down to survive in a classroom, and the person's like, no, you know, don't do that. You're like, Jesus, I'm trying to survive here.
Yeah.
So I think learning about the regulatory nature of stims, right? And now when he does them, I know that it's a great opportunity for a conversation to find out what's up. You know, much as you and I will go to a spouse or a friend and say, dude, this is really bothering me right now, you know, and you talk it out with them and you find yourself in a better state of mind afterwards. You know, now Jamie has that opportunity because to me, his stims are a reminder that now would be a good time for a conversation. I think another thing that's interesting, and I've seen this from a number of the boys, people will, you know, non-speakers will go through these kind of echolalia motor loops. Oftentimes those motor loops are like things they can barely control and may not even like. They might be kind of demonic for them. And they'll explain, like, I would like some help, like, breaking out of this habit. You know what I mean? No different than like a cigarette habit or a junk food habit or
Tourette's. Tourette's is a good example where people can't control it. They know, right? And they get annoyed with it. Absolutely.
Exactly. And so there are some of the things that Jamie does, like he'll want to grab leaves and rip them up into little pieces, and it's a habit of his. And so we ask him about it, and he says, "Yeah, I would like some help breaking that habit." Oh, okay. So that's not one that's like regulatory and you don't want us to touch because it helps you. Right. That's one where you might actually like some help in like working your way through it. So yes, we are getting insight into those quote unquote ASD behaviors and what might be behind them in a way that we never ever could have before. You know, here's a funny one. Jamie, and he's actually been doing it a little bit as I've been sitting here. He'll say these things to me that don't have any known meaning as far as I can tell, meaning that they're kind of echolalic in nature, but he'll say them to me, and his expectation is that I will repeat it back to him. Okay, and this has been I'm sure plenty of parents can relate to this. It's been a common interaction between us, and it's kind of a loving moment where we're kind of having an exchange. And so I got the chance to ask him, and I said, Jamie, you know, when you say blah, 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 what does that mean? And he said, it means you repeat it, and I know you love me.
There it is. That's so beautiful. That is such an elegant. Wow.
Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome. That's awesome.
There's a reason for everything, dude. There's a reason for everything, right?
There totally is. So, look, any plans to learn any board games, or have you done any board games with somebody, you know, handling the fine motor skill and him just, you know, calling out the moves?
Yeah. So that's like the great. So think of the letterboard as like right there. Thank you. Thank you is an example of a known word that he likes to have repeated to make a connection. So we're going to make a little transition here just for a moment because I can kind of pick up on the fact that it would be a good moment. Yeah. I just want to explain something really quickly. Sure. The letterboard is a progression. Okay, so you start with like these big stencil boards that just have 8 letters on them. Then you move to a stencil board that has like 26 letters on it. Then you move to this, and then some, and I want to emphasize that not everybody does this because it's a challenge fine motor wise. Some kids move to a keyboard, which I currently hold with a ring on the back, but that over time, and Jamie's well aware of this transition, and in his case, very motivated to make it, this becomes fixed. Right? It sits, and then you no longer have a communication partner in the loop at all. All right? So that's not true for every kid. Some kids are perfectly happy being on this for the rest of their life, or their motor challenges sort of make this the ultimate place they can go. In Jamie's case, he's got some fine motor skill that he's now developing with the help of this keyboard, and he's able to spell. So what I have here is, let's just do this here. There he is. We're in Hawaii. That's why he's got the sunglasses. I have an iPad. It's got this Proloquo for Text app up, which means that Jamie's able to immediately see the letters he's spelling.
I'm good.
And when he hits return, it says what he just spelled. So I'm just going to let Jamie talk for one moment. Mm-hmm. Go ahead. Find it. That's fine. Mhm.
I think all non-speakers can do this.
So Jamie just said it's right there at the bottom. I think all non-speakers can do this.
That
So,
is fantastic. That is
all right,
wonderful.
buddy, you can go play. You can go play. You've been
Thank you,
awesome.
Jamie. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I've got chills. That is fantastic. Just
You want to
absolutely.
stay? Oh no, he wants. You know what? I just told him he could go away because he loves playing. Go ahead, have a seat, dude.
Yeah,
He
let's
came
bring him
back.
on.
Jack. He got more. Yeah.
Well, that's
just literally-
cool. Let's do some more. I have a question for him.
I
Let me
think
ask
all
him a question.
non-speakers can do this.
Let him speak first. He has something he wants to say.
Okay, sure.
I think all non-speakers can do this.
Sorry, technical difficulties. I apologize.
That's okay.
I think all non-speakers can do this.
Oh, there we go. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Go ahead. I know what you got. Mm-hmm. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Yep. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You can do it. Yeah. Keep going. Yeah. Sorry. Mm-hmm. Nice.
I want everyone to know that we all think, feel, and learn just like you.
So he said, I want everyone to know that we all think, feel, and learn just like you. This is really important for Jamie to. Are you done now? Or you want to stay for questions?
That came through loud and clear. 10-4,
Okay, nice.
buddy. That 10-4, buddy. We got that. Loud
He's
and
still
clear.
going.
I'm not in any hurry.
Mm-hmm. Go. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You got this. Find it. Mm-hmm. Go ahead. Sometimes I reset to give his eyes a little break.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm lifting the board up like that when I do it.
I want everyone to know that we all think, feel, and learn just like you. We think in very complex ways.
Right. So we finished with we think in very complex ways. Jack, why don't you get your question in here? Because he's getting ready to roll.
Totally. So when you see the first 1,000 people who were non-speakers communicating with each other, are you going to throw a big party?
Okay. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Go ahead. You got it. He hits the delete key when he misspells things like he just did there. Go ahead.
Yes, I will be overjoyed.
He said, yes, I will be overjoyed.
I will too.
All right, buddy.
It's such an honor to meet you. Thank you. Good job on the book, Jamie. Wow. Amazing. what a collaborator you have there. You know.
I mean, he's just a really gracious, loving, caring. I mean, his priorities are really square. I'm telling you, he is the ultimate perspective giver on what's important. He really, he doesn't do social media. He doesn't hang out on a computer. He doesn't have a phone. He's detached from that loud, stressful outer world that so many of us get consumed in, and I think it's pretty toxic.
Mm-hmm.
He's completely removed from that. He doesn't have any interest, and he loves his family. He loves his friends. When he comes home from school, if he's in a bad mood, it's because one of his friends was not doing well that day at school. He's very, very, his interpersonal relationships are his priority across the board. And it's just a beautiful and wonderful thing to see. He does have a real sensitivity to people treating him like he's stupid, as you can imagine, right? Yeah. That's not hard for any of us to imagine how that's like his number one trigger and frustration. And, interestingly, and I think parents will be relieved when they hear this part of the story, Jamie was having outbursts at school that were physical in nature to himself, self-harm. And he's a big kid. He's about 6'3", 215. He's a big boy. It's hard to tell on the screen, but he's a big kid. And teachers were nervous around him because he would basically have a big tantrum and no one knew how to, what the reason was for it. Well, it turns out the reason was exactly what you would think it was. It was when people treated him like he was stupid. It drove him bananas. And you can imagine year after year of going to a school where you are severely underestimated and you have teachers who do patronize and who, without malice, talk to you like you're 3.
Right.
At some point, it just got too old. What's really fascinating is there was this one courageous teacher at our school. And our school is a microcosm for how this is happening across the country with these non-speakers who can letterboard. One courageous teacher who was not a BCBA, who said, I'll take him. I'll take him in my class with the letterboard, with the communication partner. Luckily for us, she taught the highest academic class at the school, and she was very open to new ideas. And a number of the BCBAs who had worked with Jamie, they literally warned her, well, he's going to be a behavioral challenge for you, and he's got these outbursts. And guess what?
Not one.
They all went away.
Not one.
They're gone. He hasn't one. I mean, and I'm talking like a year. Like this has been a year. Like not a small pool of days. We're in school, unlike the rest of Oregon. Jamie's been in class since June, right? So that he was never really home. Nothing. And as the S2C people explain it, this is called top-down regulation, which is a euphemism for you're not batshit crazy because people aren't treating you like you're stupid anymore.
Right.
We'd all be that way.
Absolutely.
We'd all be having outbursts.
There's not a single person. If I mean, it happens in our elderly. If you think about it, our elderly get annoyed that the kids, their kids, their adult kids, start treating them like they're infantile, and that they get angry and they get violent and they throw things across the room. It happens to the best of us.
Which kind of brings up an interesting question, right? Which is like, so are tantrums a quote unquote behavior of autism? Or are they just circumstantial? Yeah. Like all of us would break at some point, totally. Right? We're all capable of breaking, and it's like the only means they have to express themselves that point becomes like stomping around. And in my case, with Jamie, when he would have those outbursts, I would come pick him up from school, and the minute I'd pick him up, he'd be perfectly calm and happy. And I asked him about it later, and he's like, "Yeah, I knew you'd come." Then I could get out of there. He's just trying to go home.
I'm done with this crap. Understood. So it became an intentional behavior to actually control the situation. An intelligent person would do that. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So JB, I want to flash here on the screen your, I want to share with everybody your blog article about this. There's Jamie and there's you. I was so wrong about autism. Thank God. And it has a link right to the Underestimated an Autism Miracle at jbhanleyblog.com. It has a snippet, a screenshot from the book of an interaction, fascinating conversations, and some more information about JB and Jameson Handley. I have to say, you and I have known each other, 3 years or so, 4 years, something like that.
At least.
I've seen you do some incredibly good things with your time, with your mind, your resources, JB. And I have to say, everything that you've done in the past, in my opinion, pales in comparison to what you've managed to do for your son. And all that stuff was really, really cool. That all you've done a lot of cool shit, brother. And so, with gratitude, I want to be there at that 1,000-person party. I'll get my guitar out and we'll jam, we'll have music. It'll be great because it's going to happen. It's inevitable. There's an inevitability to this, my friend. And this book is a big part of it. So, what do you want to tell people? How can they change policy? This is not about selling a book. This is about changing policy and practices. What do you want? What's the action item?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I mean, so people are going to have to sue their insurance companies, right, to get this covered, right? And then that will create like a virtuous loop. The science has started, there's an eye tracking study from UVA that basically validates that the letters being chosen are being chosen by the letter border. And, the cynics try to...
By the way, we could see that on the video here.
Exactly.
If people that are watching this video, go back and watch when Jamie was actually spelling out and answering my question.
He was going back and forth from keyboard to iPad, and I don't know if you could tell. You probably could, but he'll misspell things like we all do, and he knows how to use the delete key. So he deletes it. He hits the space bar in between his words. I'm literally sitting there just holding the board. I'm not even prompting him, as you saw. I'm kind of going, right. Just kind of like providing a little bit of an underlying of support. But anyway, and then honestly, we need way more trained practitioners.
Yeah.
Like if you love children with autism and you work with them, then go to i-asc.org and sign up for what they call a cohort to start to get trained in this, because I hope that, I don't want to say this the wrong way. I hope that every S2C practitioner in the country is about to be booked out for several years. I know the phone calls are already starting, and that's fantastic, but there aren't enough of the teachers. I mean, Jack, I don't know if it's 3 million, 4 million, 5 million in the U.S. alone who are non-speakers with autism. Right. I do want to mention a couple other points about that for parents.
Sure.
First of all, I mean, Jamie is on the high end of how quickly he picked up on this. Okay, maybe upper decile or something like that. It was like $2,000 of lessons by the time Jamie was fluent. I mean, I want to put this in context. This was not, relatively speaking, for what parents spend. I mean, every dollar is precious.
Right.
This is not going to, compared to some other therapies, it's manageable money-wise. You'll see generally enough indications of what I'm telling you to be true with your own kid within the first few days of lessons. I mean, again, it's not true for every child, and sometimes I worry about raising expectations too high for how quickly this will all happen for people. Like, you're going to have to grind. You're going to have to grind and have some faith for that until that breakthrough comes. And then when you're on the other side of it, you're like, it's the best thing in the world. So we're going to need insurance to change, because without insurance, this all can't change. Like, for example, Jamie's autism school, they can't drop below a certain percentage of teachers with a BCBA, or insurance won't pay for school for like the families. And so these people who are, through their closed-mindedness, denying folks like Jamie their voice, they right now have a structural reason they can't get out of the school. The ASHA, it's like the American Speech Hearing Academy or Association. They put out a repudiation of S2C about 3 years ago that needs to be removed. Mm-hmm. They need to have their heads examined, and that whole side of things needs to change. As you can imagine, and this, there is like an autism industrial complex. It's mostly ABA therapists. That's where all the money is. This is a huge threat to their existence. And so, of course, they're willing to protect their income to such a degree that they will deny that it's the children coming out of the board. Like, can you imagine?
It's the same thing as Jamie? It's the same thing as keeping somebody locked up in jail. It's literally is. There's a social isolation that happens without this ability to communicate. There's how many learning curves have been denied because this hasn't been allowed to come forward? It's the cruelest thing in the world. I used to, when I wrote my autism book, after reading about it, the toxins and everything, my solution was, let's get all the toxins out of our kids' food, air, water, vaccines, everything. And now, I'm going to join Jamie's cause. I'm going to get behind this in a big, big way. So if there's anything that I can do to help get that white paper retracted, any communications that I can do, I mean, it truly was an honor to have that conversation with your son. I have to tell you, it meant a lot to me personally. So thank you.
You know, I really appreciate you saying that. I have to tell you, when people come to our house, because whenever we are approached by a parent in the Portland area where we live, rather than try to explain it to them on the phone or this or that, I always just say, come over.
Yeah.
I am telling you, to be in the presence of one of these children while they are spelling, it is a spiritual experience. It moves people deeply. There are always tears everywhere. And it's appropriate. It's appropriate to feel that way because it is such it's such an amazing thing. And you're in the presence of, I think, like higher order beings, right? Like they are messengers. They see the world in a way much clearer than I think many of us do. And so I appreciate you saying that about Jamie. It's an honor and a joy every time to spell with him.
Yeah.
And he always brings profound insight to the table. And to think that there's a world where this may have never happened for him is I mean, it just makes you shiver at the thought. And then right after I say that, I think about how many kids are presently in the position that Jamie used to be in.
Right.
We have a long way to go. And I will tell you that
it's criminal.
The joy and passion of a parent and their family who does have this experience is so powerful that I have a lot of faith of the change that's about to take place. You and I both know Jennifer Larson, who is a incredible advocate for children with autism and a powerful woman in her own right. And she was one of the many people who got a private phone call with me about a year ago. And she embarked upon this journey. And her son, Cade, is now completely fluent. And Cade and Jamie are very close friends. And they we have Zoom calls together where they just talk like teenagers back and forth. And I know that she's going to turn the Minneapolis area upside down over this topic. Yeah. And the analogy I use is kids get pushed into the river of autism, if you will, to the extent that you believe that causation is post-birth. And I think we should stop that. And I've done my part to try to lend a hand in that process. My first book was very much an attempt to do that.
Yep.
But this is about pulling the kids out.
Yep.
Right? And they're all here. And they all deserve to have the best possible life. And they all deserve to be understood for who they are. And the title of the book, Underestimated, to no longer be underestimated. And we are talking about millions, and we are talking about families that are suffering deeply and families that don't realize what is in their presence. Or, it's interesting, Jack, when I talk to parents, I'd say half were kind of in my camp where they're like almost in disbelief, like, you're really saying this is possible?
Right.
But the other half are like, I've always known that. We just needed a way. Like to give every parent the joy of getting to know their child, to give every child the ability to pursue their dreams.
That'd be beautiful.
Jamie will say, I have never felt this level of happiness before. I mean, what more do you need to be a fulfilled parent than to have your child say that to you? And I get a child who says that to me all the time. And I'm not even sure how to tell this to parents. Like it is literally rainbows and gumdrops and unicorns around our family. Like it is really that fa la la, like all the time.
I can see it. So listen, my challenge to the followers of Unbreaking Science is to get on the horn to your congressmen and your senators and have them get breathing down the neck of Francis Collins at the NIH, to put up brand new calls for research proposals to show the psychology, the sociology, the developmental everything. The education needs massive amounts of funding for research at universities, independent research, brainwave studies to see what's going on when they're communicating and stuff like that, so that we can actually then say, wait a minute, science was wrong, medicine was wrong, time to move on. Now, the applied behavioral analysts that are out there afraid of losing your jobs, get on the bandwagon, become a cheerleader. Because guess what? There's a whole new industry of facilitated learning for millions of kids. Facilitated learning means they say something, the computer says it, but then there's motor action that has to take place as a result of what the child said or the young adult said. So I see a whole new future of facilitated learning, not facilitated communication, facilitated learning, just as a teacher's aide in the classroom. And wow, imagine the first time that one of these kids gives a valedictorian speech. Imagine. That's going to be amazing. And it's going to happen. Only if you make
Exactly.
it happen.
The American Speech Language Hearing Association, which is the big dog, they need to wake up, right? And ABA therapists need to wake up. And people either need to be willing to help our children in novel ways, or they need to get out of the way. And, you know, according to Elizabeth Vossler, she claims there are 1,500 to 2,000 spellers. That's a very big data pool for anybody who wants to push this. And again, I'll make the point that I made earlier. There's a host of these kids, I don't have a number, that have migrated from the letterboard to a fixed keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
How many of those do you need to prove the validity of this?
That's right.
And if those kids exist, which they certainly do, why would someone who runs ASHA, why would an ABA therapist, why would a teacher of children with autism not want to run to embrace this with everything they have? You are literally unlocking the most challenging segment of the population within the world of ASD. And it's not a small number. We're talking about, estimates are somewhere between 40 and 50% of children with an autism label are in the non-speaking realm.
How old is Jamie now?
He's 18.
So is he going to vote?
Oh, and that's another point I want to make. Any age, okay?
Yeah.
Maybe below the age of 10, this isn't going to happen overnight, but they'll get on the path already. Okay, but north of 15, absolutely. But here's the thing, 30, 35, 40, don't think for a minute that they're ever too old. There's a wonderful man who's a non-speaker who I just posted on my Twitter, which is @GenRescue, GenRescue is my Twitter. I posted a video by Danny Whitey. I believe, don't quote me, that he broke open at 32. And so, you know, that's there for, you know, just parents never think they're too old. They're happy to learn at any age.
So listen, JB, this has been a sincere pleasure. People go to, I'm going to say your independent bookseller because that's the way I think, but if you go to JB's blog here and just give a click right here on Underestimated, an Autism Miracle, it'll bring you right to this. You can pre-order it. It's coming out in a few days. And we're going to help you change the world. You are changing the world. Jamie's changing the world. And please, again, reiterate my gratitude to your co-author. He's brilliant. I can't wait to hear more from him. And, you know, just rock on, brother. What can I say?
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Right on. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you are a supporter of JB, go to @GenRescue at Twitter and find his blog and follow his stuff. And if you want to support what we're trying to do here, go to patreon.com, WWDNYK, support Unbreaking Science. We have a lot more coming from a ton of experts that are sick and tired of the status quo, sick and tired of the way that codification of public health policy and science is hurting our health. So go to patreon.com, WWDNYK, and support Unbreaking Science. I can't wait to see the comments on this. Leave your comments and share the video. Like and follow us on Facebook and like and follow us on YouTube and help us get the message out, my friends. Thank you very much.